Good afternoon and welcome to the Community Development Block Grant Committee meeting of Thursday, July 31st. Could we have roll call, please?
Sure. Committee members: Armenian.
Present.
Markarian.
Present.
Ramirez is absent. Tashjian is also absent. Chair Olivares.
Here. Okay.
Report of recording secretary regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for the July 31st, 2014 meeting of the CDBG Advisory Committee was posted on or before Monday, July 28th, 2014 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Item 2 is minutes. At A, approval of the minutes of the February 21st, 2014, February 24th, 2014, and April 23rd, 2014 CDBG Advisory Committee meeting.
Okay. I have no comments. Does anybody have any comments or a motion?
No.
Actually, I wanted to point out that because both committee members, Ramirez and Tashjian, are not here today, and Chair Olivares was not here in a couple of the meetings, we're not going to have a quorum to be able to vote on any of these meetings. So we'll bring it back at a later time.
So we'll bring back the meeting minutes.
Excuse me?
The meeting minutes, you mean?
Yes, the meeting minutes we can bring back at a later meeting.
Okay.
For approval.
Thank you. Next item is oral communications. I have no cards and I see nobody in the audience. So let's move on to item 4, business agenda.
4A under business agenda action items. At 1, report regarding the development of the city's 5-year consolidated plan, community needs assessment strategy, and fiscal year 2015-16 annual action plan. At A is a motion to note and file a report regarding the development of the city's 5-year consolidated plan, community needs assessment strategy, and fiscal year 2015-16 annual action plan.
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Duran, I know some of our members have not been here for a 5-year plan before, so maybe a quick presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We've been working on a 5-year consolidated plan. Well, we're in our 5th year of a consolidated plan year coming up. Consolidated plan, and I'll go through the slides, essentially a 1-year plan times 5, but does give us the strategies, the goals and objectives to implement the HUD programs that we have. It's not only CDBG, but it's also the housing home program, the homeless ESG program, and any other type of federal program that's required to be coordinated with CDBG. But I'll briefly go through the slides and highlight some of the items which are addressed in the report, but there will be some certainly some questions on this, so I can pause. The plan is required to be submitted to HUD to receive federal HUD funds. That is a strict requirement. We don't get the 5-year plan, we don't receive CDBG funds. Essentially, it's like a strategic plan, like any business plan, community plan. It's a blueprint for addressing community and development and housing needs. It's implemented to development of submission of annual plans. So as we do our CDBG projects, our activities, those are 1-year plans, and those are part of the 5-year plan. So the 1-year plan should be consistent with the 5-year plan as the goals and objectives. It's flexible to respond to changing needs, priorities, and opportunities. What we mean by that is we can change the 5-year plan if there's changes in our priorities, if there's changes in the community, and let's say, for example, there's a different need for a economic development shift or something, we can amend the plan, we can work on the plan. So it's not rigid, and that's one of the beauties of the consolidated plan, that we can make adjustments depending on the priorities or needs. What the plan does is really provide, and HUD wants us to do, is make sure we provide residents, agencies, and stakeholders to participate in the development of program priorities. In your report, there is an attachment that outlines the community needs assessment strategies that talk about which agencies or which groups we want to intend to communicate with, and that's the 2015-2020 Consolidated Plan Community Needs Assessment Outreach Strategy handout. That's part of that memo. The action plans also are developed through this 5-year plan, and it again establishes annual priorities, which we have been doing the last 5 years, and certainly the last year we were involved with the annual action plan. There's also a piece of that making sure we address as a comprehensive way of approaching to helping the homeless and providing coordination with homeless programs is a very essential part of the consolidated plan and HUD strategy to end homelessness. So that is a component that's addressed through our continuum of care. The 5-year, again, as I mentioned, focuses on funding and goals for the CDBG, ESG, and home programs. Although we do have other programs that we do fund and are involved with, these are the primary programs. And the committee is primarily involved with the CDBG, which is the largest program of all of these 3 programs. So that's why we certainly engaged the committee to give us their goals and funding allocations for CDBG. The strategy does incorporate Section 8 housing funds, the continuum of care homeless funds, and WIA is the Workforce Investment Act strategies, which is the economic development arm for the city, the workforce arm for the city, and those strategies and funding levels. We do work with the Workforce Investment Act and the Vertical Job Center very closely to make sure we're utilizing the availability of their facility, their funding, to address some of the needs of the CDBG program and the other programs. And community development initiatives, and that's the Community Development Department, and that's really the housing department of community development, but also the planning department. Planning department has just completed a South Glendale plan, which addressed a lot of transportation and planning needs of the community. So we'll be actually bringing some of that information back to the committee to look at those that are relevant to us. We did have co-meetings with planning department, planning section for the South Glendale plan, which we will bring now their findings to the committee as well. In terms of funding, this is projection for 5 years, and CDBG is projected at $1.7 million per year times 5. ESG is $150,000, and home at $1 million per year, for a total of $14,250,000. That's approximately half of what we had projected 5 years ago, when we know the last 3-4 years we've been cut almost 50% just on that alone. So that's a very significant reduction of funding of what we're capable of doing as far as implementing new strategies and focusing on our current priorities. So our plan needs to be within these funding priorities or funding projections. The needs assessment and citizen participation, again, referring back to our strategy, does incorporate some activities in the community, starting with the census demographics and looking at the 2010 census and updates. The census does update the census now every 3 or 5 years, and it's called American Community Surveys, and they do basically models of what demographics are changing. So we'll get some of that updated data as well. The community nurse surveys, as you remember in the past, those are the lengthy surveys. I think we gave you a sample of one that we began to utilize throughout the community to provide input on what are the needs. It's a very thorough survey. It does list out most activities that we are able to fund and involved with, but it does give us an idea of where those priorities are and what community is thinking. It is a questionnaire. We do try to compare the categories to each other and even the needs. We know that there are, depending on the areas, different needs, but overall it's a very good survey questionnaire tool to give us an idea of what's happening in the community. Community events, we do participate. We did go, for example, to Cruise Night, where we did surveys, and we had about 96 surveys completed at Cruise Night. We were at Movies at the Park, and we had about 30 surveys. We will be next Tuesday at the National Night Out on Tuesday, August the 5th, I believe, at Pacific Park, along with surveys again. And again, questions from the community about what we're doing, and we do take input as far as where they think parks may need to be. So it's not just a survey, but it's our chance to talk to the public and get their opinions. Focus groups is the meeting that we have every year in September at Mann Elementary School. And again, that's broken up to groups to have smaller groups to discuss with us what are the needs of the community, what they're seeing. So that's another input strategy we're using. And of course, the public hearing, which is in the spring when we come back with all the needs and get feedback on that. So all in all, we're looking at 630, 750 direct residents involved in surveys, in our meetings, in our events. So it's something that we want to certainly increase always, but we're looking at that as a number for this year for the consolidated plan. Some of the challenges we have for the consolidated plan and our 5-year plan is the diminished resources of services and infrastructure. Again, going from the big budget cuts the last few years is, of course, as you know, the RFPs come in largely over the amount of available funds. That's certainly a concern, and infrastructure continue to be able to maintain our parks and provide funds for needed community facility improvements like our nonprofits. The 2010 census, we're going to need to begin to analyze that a little bit more in depth because there are possible some changes in the neighborhoods that may have either decreased their low moderate income or increased their low mod. And it seems to me that we're kind of steady. There may be some neighborhoods that are increasing low mod because of concentrations, but something we need to look at and see where there's starting to show some shifts in demographics. Of course, a big part is prioritizing need, which we will come back to the committee to look at after all of our surveys and our meetings and everything else is done, where we think the priorities are going to be essentially with our social services, our neighborhood improvements, our capital funds, our economic development strategies, our housing. So there will be some consultation with the committee on that. And of course, we do have increased HUD and state regulatory requirements. But HUD continues to add administrative work to staff to provide extra reporting, provide extra information, and of course, the state also has its own requirements for it. So again, given those are some of our challenges. But I think the 5-year plan is something that we certainly want to encourage the committee to be involved with, is participating in any of our focus group meetings or our community meetings we have. Again, the next one coming up is Tuesday at National Night Out at Pacific Park at 5 p.m., I believe. And those, again, are some of the activities we'll do to do the 5-year plan. So I did add, again, in the report, the strategy and the questionnaire. We're asking for, certainly, the committee to approve the motion to motion to note and file a report regarding this community needs assessment strategy and 5-year plan for the consolidated plan. The consolidated plan is due May 15th to HUD. It follows the same cycle as we do with our annual action plan, so we're not anticipating changing the dates, for example, the months when we do RFPs or the months that the advisory committee does their interviews with the agencies. We're just ramping up our staffing to incorporate some more activities to get more input for the consolidated plan and, of course, our annual action plan. So that's the 5-year consolidated plan for 2015-2020, and that would, certainly open for questions or comments on that.
Okay, thank you, Moises. Any questions?
One question. When the community meeting, that's in September. Do you have a date yet?
September. The community meeting in September, we have tentatively September 24th. That's the, and I believe, Committee Member, you were there at the meeting last year at the school?
No, I missed it.
Okay. Yeah, that's September 24th, tentatively. Okay. We're trying to confirm with the school. We will know later on, early August, because of the open houses and all their scheduling. They're just getting back to school. So that's our tentative date for the community meeting with the residents that we bring focus groups.
How will you get the word out about that? Do you have like previous participants you'll reach out to, or?
Correct. We have the master list of previous participants, and our outreach, of course, is through newspaper ads. We do give out flyers to all the Southern Glendale school students, the elementary schools. We do the ads in the newspapers, and it was Asbaraz, L'Opinion, the Spanish paper, the LA Times News Press, to our own media as far as GTV6. So a number of outreach activities we do to get the word out for residents to come.
And then the focus groups, is that different than the community meeting?
That's the same thing, yeah.
That's the same
The community
thing.
meeting is the meeting, the focus group is when we break out to
Oh,
4 or
into the
5 groups.
right.
Yes.
At that meet, at that
Yes.
community meeting, okay.
I did want to add one part of this, and I missed this one, but that's a good question. There is a topic-related focus group. The topics are going to be, for example, stakeholders, and stakeholders would be social service stakeholders, which are community agencies and our nonprofits, talking about what are the community development needs for youth, seniors, immigration, all kinds of social service human needs. That will be a meeting we'll begin to schedule, I think, late in September. The second meeting will also be a focus group topic for housing. So that will be our housing partners, our nonprofit housing developers, our housing staff, fair housing advocates to focus in on what the needs in housing from the stakeholder point of view. And then there's also a homeless focus group with we call the continuum of care, the homeless coalition of the homeless agencies and what they see on their part. These aren't the residents, these are the agencies and the public and public agencies like the school district to give us input on the needs. So we try to balance out residents as well as what the agencies see as needs, and it really is a good way of seeing where needs are and balancing those needs.
So the need assessment will be used for 2015, and we'll extend that for another 5 years.
Correct.
However, there'll be probably some revisits and adjustments that we'll be making during those 5 years.
Correct. Yeah, every year we'll do some focus group meetings in the fall and maybe some survey work to see if needs are changing in the 5 years. So we generally have not had the shifts in the 5 years, but 5 years ago we did have some different situations. So this might be an interesting year to see what has changed, especially since the recession, what has changed. There may be more need for job ESL, maybe more need for job training. So it does change. I mean, we went through a difficult recession, and now I think it's time to see what needs are still out there.
Based on that, it is possible that HUD will change the funding based on, the next assessment. Just looking at the poverty level increase or decrease, and
that's a good, excellent question. Yes, actually could be because now they're using 3-year surveys or data. It could be that HUD will readjust. We're hoping will readjust if, again, the levels have increased, which we might see that or not. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, this could be a way of showing HUD that the numbers have gone up or down. I don't know. But
you don't think we'll see another decrease, do you? I mean, it's always possible.
Well,
but
it's
I
always
think
possible. The
took
funding
so
is,
many
yes,
hard
we took
cuts.
so many hard hits. I know our demographics had changed in 2010, but since then, 3-4 years now, we may have seen the shift, so we'll have to wait and see what our numbers look like. But yes, that's a possibility that they may say, well, we cut you when your numbers are down. Now we may not increase you. A lot depends on the federal budget. It's the federal budget which is guiding us now as far as the allocation for us, because it has been cuts in sequestration and all the other budget battles. We don't have a budget yet for federal government, which starts September 1st, and we'll know that Congress probably won't have anything. We'll use a continuing resolution to continue just the same amount of funding. So it is challenging for us to know how much funding we're going to get now.
But this plan is just one factor in their decisions on how much, right?
Demographics are one. Well, I think that's the
census.
main. The census is the main
Is the
element. They
main.
use raw data. The data is just.
So how do they use this plan?
Well, we use this plan locally to
Right.
define our priorities.
But we also, you said, we have to submit it to HUD. Do you know how they use it?
Well, they would use the data and more so the strategies and the goals. So if we're saying we're going to serve 500 youth throughout the 5 years, they would have benchmarks for us saying, well, you need to continue your strategy. If you're deviating from that and you want to include something else, then you need to change your plan. So it's a way of HUD also monitoring the city
Right.
as well.
If I may, Mr. Chair, expand on that a little bit. The city's HUD grant is a formula grant, which means that that we are eligible to receive the amount that HUD sets aside for Glendale. So what this plan does, it shows HUD how we intend to utilize our grant funds. And so HUD needs to know and to see that we've identified what our local priorities are and that we've developed a long-term strategy to address the priorities that have been identified. And so for the next subsequent 5 years, they will see that what we propose year in and year out is consistent with that 5-year strategy, or that we have submitted different information that particular year from our needs assessment to make modifications to the 5-year strategy. But in terms of funding levels going up or down based on this plan, it's funding levels are not tied to this plan. The funding levels are tied to things bigger than the CDBG program, like different federal priorities. For example, it could be in a couple of years more funding is needed for Obamacare or further health reform or immigration reform, and they have to take it from somewhere, and so they will determine that those priorities have overtaken a little bit more from CDBG or vice versa. It's so hard to tell.
So when will we actually see the plan?
The draft plan, it would be, I think, available in probably till March 2015.
But we'll be back. Our next advisory committee meeting will be in late October, and we will discuss a proposed funding allocation plan based on the best information we have at that time from HUD in terms of what we have available to allocate and the different funding categories, right?
Yeah, the priorities, as mentioned, the correct priorities and strategies will be, yes, in October. The big plan is the plan will be drafted out in March for comment. It does take a while to do all the it's about 500-page document. It's pretty lengthy as far as the amount of data we have to put in there. Because it encompasses housing a lot and CDBG as well as homeless programs and special needs, so it's not just the CDBG portion.
And so this this plan will also, I'm looking at the calendar, you guys had in the package. So late October 29th is when we would be, in theory, reviewing a draft of it, but then it would be submitted to City Council for Housing Authority meeting November 18th.
No, that's just a strategy. Those are kind of some priorities, some data that we looked at.
Okay.
Sorry, some needs that we're looking at. So we should be done by needs assessment. After that, then we still, as staff, need to develop the strategy and the action plan and the activities that we're going to do, the goals that we're going to, the quantitative goals that we're going to need to implement, and bring that back to the committee. Because again, it's just a very lengthy document. And so we take it step by step by doing our strategies, our needs, and priorities, and then defining what are the strategies and the numbers and the goals, and that would be in the spring of 2015.
Okay.
I did have a detailed question. One of the items on the strategies had to do with Section 8 housing, and affordable housing, I'm assuming, but Section 8 is pretty much non-existent at this point.
Section 8 still, Mr. Chair, Section 8 still has... still has, well, funding, of course, but it is, the waiting list is closed, but they still do, as vacancies occur, go off the waiting list. But it's a very critical part as far as what we can do sometimes. We do a lot of matches with providing referrals that, for example, homeless populations sometimes are able to get in Section 8 with preferences, or veterans, for example. So we do look at Section 8 and their funding levels. If there's a cut in Section 8, it means that a lot of people may end up being homeless or may need additional assistance. So it's a lot of interaction between us and Section 8. But yes, it is closed. There's no waiting list is still closed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we see any possibility of that changing anytime soon, especially with redevelopment gone and all of that. So, okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Moises. Okay, so do we have a motion? We need a motion to file it and note it and file. Right?
Note and file.
All right, let's see.
So you need a motion to note and file the report. Okay. So I'll make a motion.
Okay, so we have a motion.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Committee members Armenian,
Yes.
Markarian.
Yes.
Ramirez is absent, Tashin is absent, Chair Olivares.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So let's go on to item 2, review and approve program planning schedule.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, you did receive a planning schedule for the action plan. Again, this is the one-year part of the action plan for the 5 years. So again, this just summarizes the dates. And what's important here is the bold, which will be your proposed meeting dates at this point. Of course, we know that we've in certain cases, we've had to add more meeting dates for special meetings for project changes or project information. So the first meeting, of course, being today, July 31st. Next meeting proposed for October 29th. It doesn't mean we may or may not have a meeting in August or September, depending on activities or projects that may need, or staff may need direction. So that would be our calendar for that. The important thing is, again, is for us to note that we do have to go to council for our recommendations in November and then RFP out. So this calendar is very similar to last year. What I haven't put in the pieces yet is the dates when you'll get the consolidated plan, when some of that will come up, and we're still working on those dates and activities when those draft plans will come out. But by and large, it will be in the spring of 2015 where we'll have the big 5-year plan starting to look better and be able to be commented on. But essentially, it is a plan that's very similar to last year, and we will have the interviews, which are February 27th and March 2nd, have been locked in as far as the city council chambers go. So those are definite dates that we'd like the committee to please pencil in now, because those will be.
Well, I'm glad you didn't do it Valentine's Day again.
I know. I remember that. That was bad.
22nd in March.
I'm sorry, February 27th will be the full day, and that's, I believe, is a Wednesday.
It's actually a Friday.
Friday. And the following week, March 2nd, which is a Monday.
Okay.
And that's a half day. And those were certainly the dates that we would lock in now for our reviews of the proposals. We don't expect, again, any changes in any processing or procedures for the RFPs. Depending on council direction, we will continue to do the CDBG proposals as well. We don't expect any HUD changes on any of that either, so it should be fairly much like last year.
Would there be a mandatory orientation attendance? I mean, I remember last year we kind of waived that, or it wasn't as mandatory. So it's more recommended?
It's a recommended technical assistance workshop. I think what we did this year, we gave it a little bit more time from the time the RFP came out to alert agencies about the RFP. It didn't, we usually have a week or so. We give about 10 days, I believe, so that the agencies know ahead of time and to be available for the meeting. It's not a mandatory meeting. It's highly recommended. Mm-hmm. I think most of the agencies that do apply do come to that meeting. They know it's very important for them. They want to get, the advantage, so they do come to that meeting. And what we're doing this year is giving them extra time for between the time we publish the RFP and the time the technical assistance meeting in. Hopefully that will allow them to attend.
Okay. We need a motion.
I'd like to move to approve the program planning schedule for the year 2015-16 annual action plan.
Second that motion.
Okay, roll call.
Committee members Armenian,
Yes.
Markarian,
Yes.
Ramirez and Tashin are absent, Chair Olivares.
Yes. Okay, 4B, reports, information only.
At 1 is projected funding allocation plan.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, what we put out here was just the kind of summary of the last 3 years of CDBG funding, and you can see the funding levels, how they've kind of gone up and down a little bit. The projection for us for fiscal 15-16 right now, and this is very tentative, is about $1.7 million. What you'll see is that we have utilized pretty much all of our what we call unprogrammed funds, where projects get completed under budget and their funds are able to be rolled over. We no longer have that luxury. Projects are going pretty tight on budget and utilizing the funding that's available. So we don't have carryover funds right now. What could change is the program income. Old CDBG housing loans that we provided years ago sometimes get repaid back by the homeowners, and so sometimes you'll see, for example, here last year was $58,000. So that's something we may or may not have this year, but it does seem pretty straightforward that we're going to have about 1.7. We hope it doesn't get cut any lower. We hope it gets increased, but that's kind of a rough figure of what we're doing now, and that's how we're going to be planning our activities. And you'll see administration again being at a level between 13, 14, 14, 15, still a lot less than we've had in prior years. Public social services, again, a little lower because we don't have that program income. So it's at $255,000. That's certainly a big, certainly a concern for us to continue to fund our nonprofits, but we have less money. So again, that's certainly a concern we have. Neighborhood improvements, again, $1.101 million. That's generally been utilized for our Section 108 loan, which we have to pay back to HUD at about $240,000 a year. Our code enforcement activities and our park projects, and then also the nonprofit. What we'll find in the capital is that as we do our needs assessment process and social services, we'll find out a bit more where are those needs as well for capital neighborhood improvements that may change a little bit on strategies a little bit, depending again on our needs assessment and what we're finding out, especially social services where we may see there's a shift for example, senior services or other type of special needs for disabilities. So we'll know more as we go through our surveys and our needs assessment, how the community has changed for the 5 years. But that's our general estimate, and we're hoping that certainly we get extra money versus less. But as soon as we hear something, we will advise the committee prior to the October meeting, but hopefully by then we'll know a little bit more about our funding plan.
Of the loans that we're committed to pay back, I believe there are two.
Mr. Chair, we have one left. We had paid off the Pacific Park loan,
right,
and now we are in our third year of our Ascensia loan. That's the Emergency Shelter Access Center loan.
So Pacific Park's paid off.
Yes.
That was completed. So we have Ascensia for how much longer?
Ascensia we're in third year, so we have about 7 more years to pay.
And how much a year?
$240,000 a year, approximately.
So in 7 years, we'll have a little extra money coming in.
Are we foreseeing specific projects that would, in the next 5 years, that the city is, kind of going to put under designated funds? Are there any large projects that, like parks or certain community centers, that we think may go under pre-designated?
That may go undesignated?
Pre-designated funds that would become pre-designated in the next 5 years.
Chairman Olivares, members of the committee, absent any other information or any other direction, we'll typically program as designated funding the Southern Glendale Code Enforcement Program, our Section 108 loan payment, and a park project, a Southern Glendale Park project.
Okay, but that has been at the impetus of a council member, correct?
Beg your pardon?
That's not a policy. That's more when a particular council member may have a desire to do that.
It's the most recent general consensus direction received by council.
From council.
In addition to that, right now, absent any other information or direction, we would continue to appropriate $300,000 or recommend appropriating $300,000 to the community. So in November, when we go to City Council with that proposed plan, will be the City Council's opportunity to indicate whether they want us to fund something different. For example, you might remember last year, I don't remember if it was the November meeting or the April meeting, where a council person questioned the wisdom of continuing to use CDBG for code enforcement. So that discussion could come up again. In the past, there's been discussion about pre-designating the funds that we've been using for a park project and opening that up. And maybe still end up with the park project, but at least have the opportunity to see what other projects are out there that could utilize that same amount of funding. So November will be the opportunity for the City Council to review that again and let us know, give us direction as to whether they're okay with the current way that we're prioritizing designated and undesignated, or if they want to give us different direction.
And would we, is it possible to have a discussion about that on the October 29th meeting so that maybe we could make a recommendation to express the committee's point of view on that?
I would definitely agree with that.
I think that would be
Good.
useful to them, even if they might not agree with us. I think it would be useful for them to hear from us.
One of the main agenda items will be the proposed funding allocation plan. And so staff will have a recommendation, we'll review it, the committee will decide what we should recommend to City Council, and that's what we'll go with.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now, does this require a motion?
No, I'm sorry. What's this motion to approve program plan?
Yeah. Okay, any other questions on that item?
Motion to approve.
Okay, with that, so we're done with 4B. Next is item 5,
Item-
committee staff comments. Have any staff comments?
I'm just a second, we're just checking this motion required. Oh, the project funding plan? Okay, it doesn't, okay. Yes, Mr. Chair, if I can make a couple announcements. We did leave on your advisor the map of the code enforcement area. This was requested by the CDBG Advisory Committee at our last meeting to get an idea of where the code enforcement CDBG target areas are. And again, in that blue section is the central part of Glendale where CDBG code enforcement activities are taking place, and as well as that orange area. So it's kind of, the yellow area is, for example, no longer CDBG code enforcement. So these are the areas that the code enforcement staff paid out of CDBG do their inspections. Now, they've also, again, committees welcome to attend and drive along with the inspectors to see what kind of activities they're involved with as far as inspections. And we will just leave that open to whatever day the committee's members feel they'd like to come along with the housing inspectors. And they're certainly welcome to any time to come along with us. I think that you'll find it very interesting how the process works and how much housing is inspected by our CDBG code enforcement staff on a daily basis.
I would be interested. I'll get in touch with staff to schedule something.
Thank you.
Is it 5 days a week or what?
5 days a week.
Okay.
Saturday, no, 5 days a week, yeah. 8 to 5, 8 to 3 or so.
Okay.
A general question, do you see any of the current recipients having any issues in terms of using the money on time, in terms of, providing?
Mr. Chair, no, we're starting off, I'll preface this, we're finishing off our 2013-14 year. It seems like everyone has expended their funds, and it seems everyone has met their goals or exceeded their goals. So there's no social service projects, no issues there. Our capital projects are moving along. Most of our 13-14 projects are done, including, for example, the Home and Edmond roof project, the first phase of that. When we know that Home and Edmond came in for us, showing us the buckets that were coming out. So their roof is done, the first phase. They have another phase in 2014 that's going to continue with some improvements. On the Door Hope transitional housing facility for women and children, that first electrical project was done. We did the total electrical improvements and also windows. the new windows were done, and the door hook was able to match with air conditioners. Great site. Finally aired to this hot summer, is working in there. Our next phase is the plumbing project, which we're going to begin doing. We finished specifications, everything else is done, and we're getting ready to bid out later this month. The YMCA ramp project, their ADA project, is already done with specifications and building plan check. They should be going out to bid later this month in August. The Armenian Relief Society is going to have, they did some slight changes in what they wanted to do. They requested 3 items. They're doing security improvements, so their project will be going. So all of our projects are on board now, either completed or ongoing. There were no funds that were left behind on any of the projects. They were all, like I said, utilized fully, with even the agencies having to match funds. And then we can see a rising cost in construction, especially for our prevailing wages, which have driven cost up quite a bit. So we haven't had any issues at this point.
And the city staff administration has just upped 20%.
What's that?
You've just upped the 20% for last year.
Yes, we're close to that. We're close to that. We hope to be able to be a little below it, but it is pretty tight with our limited resources. But we got a great staff, and they really do a lot more, and 110% what they're capable of doing, and they implement these projects as directed by the committee and council.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? No? We do have a letter.
Mr.
here.
Chair, now before I forget, only because I don't want to miss this opportunity, but we do have, I think the Iris sent over a notice for the Maryland Park opening on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Maryland Park was purchased with CDBG funds by the advisory committee, and state bond funds were utilized for the construction, but it is essentially started off as a CDBG project. CDBG funds also did a lot of the public improvements, the alleys, the street lights, the streets. Housing did some housing facilities. So it's a very CDBG-focused project, and certainly would like the committee to participate and be there for this opening. It is a beautiful park and does have a lot of features for the community, including community garden. So that really would be a very nice project for the CDBG committee to attend. We also, again, as I mentioned before, have our National Night Out at Pacific Park, which we know was a park that was largely funded CDBG, in the community center, the pool, the field. We just finished the artificial turf. If you have not seen that artificial turf, which was funded by CDBG, again, that's a good activity to participate in. We will have staff there administering our surveys, but certainly welcome the committee members to come by, and I'm sure they're going to have some food and drinks there, so it would be really nice to have the committee there as well. It starts at 5 p.m., I believe, till like
What was the date on the
37?
second one?
August the 5th. That's the same Tuesday.
Okay.
You guys will be busy partying all day.
Oh, it's going to be fun. Yeah.
Okay. We do have a letter from Ascensia. You might want to mention that.
I do know I don't have the dates on that, but Ascensia is having as one of our CDBG funded agency, as well as the recipient.
Friday, August 22nd.
Right, okay. And their 100,000 homes campaign, that's a national campaign to house homeless persons. Glendale had its own goals, and the Ascensia did exceed that number, and they will be holding a little event here. Certainly, again, like to welcome the committee to come and participate in that. It's a very big milestone for us to continue to house the homeless here in Glendale, and recognize those who have been supportive of the program, including the CDBG Advisory Committee and the Council, and our agencies and staff as well. So we'd really like to have you there.
You know, that's one of those that throughout the years we've supported Ascensia, and they've always come on,
Yes.
always accomplished goals, and always done really good things in the community. So I definitely plan to be there.
Yeah, I'll try to be there.
So I just wanted to clarify, because I was going through my email that Iris had sent around. So August 5th is, because one date shifted, right?
The one for Maple Park Grand reopening was moved to September 20th, I believe.
Okay.
But the one for Maryland,
Maryland is still August 5th?
August 5th, correct.
It's
Both
10
are-
a.m.
10 to 11:30.
Yes, both of them are at 10 a.m.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll have you know that my kids grew up at Maple Park. When I first moved to Glendale, I lived across the street.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting
we
for me to
remember.
see what's changed.
A lot has changed, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it.
That's,
Okay.
yeah, the next
for the
item
agenda.
is adjournment.
Our next meeting, again, is October 29th, unless we are called for a special meeting. Sometime it seems likely, we have activities or projects, but that will be our next meeting. And we hope to see you between now and then for our community meetings, our focus group meetings, our openings, and
And you'll confirm those dates and times as they get
Correct.
confirmed? Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, committee
Thank
members,
you.
for showing up today.
thank you.
And we'll see you soon. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.